And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions. What
the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Welcome to Conspiracy Queries Broadcasting, the very first show back on since we've all been placed into a new geographical region known as Trumpland. That's Michael Moore came up with that. I'm not really comfortable with that as a Canadian because I understand like you don't say Maryland and that you say Maryland. And so we don't say Newfoundland. We say Newfoundland. But we don't. We say Newfoundland. And they say Newfoundland. So anyway, we're in Trumpland. If you're a Canadian, and Trumpland if you're American. And everybody's upset about it. Everybody's upset about it. There are protests and riots and people that said when they go low, we'll go high. And now those folks have no trouble going low. So there were nothing but lies and lies and lies across the board. And a few true things. But I think it's kind of like a Venn diagram now. It's not really the blue and the red versus the up and the down. There's a merging. You have blue interests and red interests, and they overlap, so you've got some purple there, but let's not upset the slightly lighter purple guy because he's also got financial ties to someone else, and it's just not the clean political party back and forth system that I think we are fooling ourselves with as a horse race. And along comes Donald Trump and wins it somehow, huh? Again, with fewer votes. They do that all the time in the States. They do that almost half the time with their elections. The person with the most votes does not get to be the winner. That's how they do it down there sometimes. That's how you guys do it down there, the ones that are listening. Like Canada's system is any better. All right. Well, let's get to the show. It's a long one, okay? It was going to be a really long one, and I decided I got to cut this in half. But I'm so happy with it. It's great because I'm just going back to the pool of folks that I already know a lot of things, and I've already spoken with them, and it's always fascinating. So let's have him back. He's a regular guest, and it's always a thrill and an honor to bring this guy on because he does all kinds of things. He's funny. He's smart, and he flies helicopters, and he's just a wonderful guy. And sometimes he's Lenny Bloom, sometimes he's Nelson Thal, because we find that it's easier sometimes to present certain aspects of information under a certain persona. Don't we, Mr. President? See what I mean? So here we go. We're gonna bring Nelson on. And he's got some fascinating things to say. This whole episode is going to hang on the election and JFK's assassination because we're right in between the two. We're right in between those two dates. Before we get to it, a little local news. This is happening all over the place. There's a new poll out that suggests that more Torontonians, that's where I live, they prefer the classic regular white and blue and red police cars, not these gray cars that are popping up all over the place. These the new cars they have, they're like these gray stealth Ford somethings, and the trouble with them is that they really blend in. But the big trouble is it's obviously a militarization on down, and to pretend otherwise is ridiculous. It's happening in the States. It's happening here. Militarization of police forces. That is what is going on. It's going on all over the place. It's a process where the police get to buy or have gifted to them, I'm sure, sometimes military equipment and design their department's administration of justice a little more around the military than the police. And it's uncomfortable. They're bringing in LRADs. They're bringing in they're thugs. Okay, that's what they're doing. If they're bringing those things in, we don't need that stuff. You don't need it. So I'm comfortable to say case closed on that. But they're bringing those things in, and you can tell they're lying because the police chief of Toronto, his name is Mark Saunders, he said that he's just doing this because he likes the look of it better and he thinks it's better, and he didn't really put any deep thought into it at all. And so here's where I'm conflicted. On the one hand, I do believe that these things are a military incursion and a militarization to bolster the downtowns of the societies, to make us subservient to these tanks and machines everywhere, because that's what they're doing. So that's why I do believe it. But on the other hand, when a police officer admits, and the police chief at that he didn't really use any deep thought at all, I tend to believe him. So I'm going to have to get over that controversy my own self. Let's get to the show. We have a fantastic time. Stick around because it's going to be a two-parter. We'll throw the other one out shortly, and please do sit back and enjoy from your most favorite seat in Trumpland. Our guest today, Mr. Lenny Bloom. Let's go to the interview. There's a lot of conquer and divide. Conquer and divide, conquer and divide. It's kind of a strategy, isn't it? And the conquer and divide of not knowing why you're disappointed a candidate lost or won in the election, and you say, with your knowledge, what was important was to make sure that the Hillary machine was not elected. And that if a circus ape was running against her, that's where you'd want to vote. Not that Trump's the greatest guy in the world and he's not going to make any mistakes or lie, but the important thing you felt was that there were people working to get her out, and that we're better off that she did not win, regardless of what you might think about racism or women getting through glass ceilings to next job levels. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think it's important that when we're looking at Hillary Clinton to understand and go back to the beginning as to where she made her political capital and how she got to where she is. And the way in which she did that is she was George Herbert Walker Bush, his lawyer. She was his lawyer on the Watergate committee. And what happened was George Herbert Walker Bush was in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963.
But he said he didn't know where he was before on that day. He's been asked before. Do you remember where you were?
Well, of course, that's the proof that he was there, of course.
He's in the same city.
Everybody knows where they were when they heard about the Kennedy assassination. He, of course, knew where he was but couldn't admit it.
He was working for the government at the time, but he couldn't recall where he was. And oh gosh, it was the same city? Unbelievable.
He was a high-level agent within the CIA. You'll recall he was eventually became the deputy director and then the director of the CIA eventually. But Jim Garrison said that he was in Dealey Plaza, showed pictures of him in Dealey Plaza. The FBI said that he was very much involved in the assassination, and there's a letter from the FBI to the State Department to that effect. Everybody who's studied this, from Mark Lane to Josiah Thompson to Penn Jones to Sherman Skolnick to Mae Brussel, all say that Bush was in Dealey Plaza running the assassination. Now, what's that got to do with Hillary Clinton, you say? Well, when the Warren Commission concluded its report in 1964, it took all the evidence that was in the archives and sealed it away for 75 years. Now, George Bush wanted to get that sanitized.
Now, just before you carry on, why would you do that? But the natural instinct is to go, here, let's see what happened. Take a look at it.
Yeah.
And you want to understand what happened.
Well, it was a coup d'etat, which means that the people who took over the government with the assassination when they assassinated Kennedy, they not only went in at noon Dallas time, not only did they assassinate him, but remember, the assassination was not just to kill the man in the office. It was to destroy the executive branch of government. So they went into the White House and they took over the White House. That's why Mark Lane's book was called Executive Action, because it was not the holder of the executive branch. It was the destruction of the executive branch and usurp it and take it over and just put a puppet in as president, which they did. All the presidents after Kennedy were puppets of the coup.
So all those presidents in consecutive order through are being backed by the same people?
We're all puppets of the people who were behind the coup. So a power group took over the United States as a coup d'etat, and therefore every president after that, up until now, that's what's so important about this election of Trump. Up to now, from Kennedy to Trump, every president has been a puppet. As a matter of fact, they got to the point with Reagan is they hired an actor to play the role of president. Ronald Reagan was not the president of the United States any more than Sir Laurence Olivier was Hamlet. Laurence Olivier is hired to play the role of Hamlet. Reagan was an actor hired to play the role of the president.
Well,
George Herbert Walker Bush, prior to becoming president of the United States in the 70s, now wanted to sanitize the JFK files of all the evidence proving that he was a major central force in the assassination. To do that, he used Hillary Rodham Rockefeller Clinton. She was his lawyer on the Watergate Committee, got the access to the archives, the JFK files that had been sealed away for 75 years, got the right to go into those files and sanitize those files with Sandy Berger.
That guy. We got to talk about Sandy Berger some more too, but yeah.
And if you go to Google, just Google in, people listening to this show, just Google in Sandy Berger, Hillary Clinton. You can read all the stories in the New York Times, etc., about how after this, she did this regularly, sanitized files and destroyed files, and he was charged taking files out of the archives. Leave that alone. Let's go back. So this is where Hillary Clinton made her political capital. As Daddy Bush's lawyer, she had all this evidence, and she kept it. And she used it so that she would be protected. So if Bush thought he would try and do something to her, she could always pull out those files. So they had this working relationship, and that's how she made her political capital. And all these years, she's been a tool of that coup.
Why do people think her background is so clean?
Well, the winners always rewrite history. And those who take over by a coup and take over are going to change the history, and they're above the law. So they sanitize the forensics. So they can make your birth certificate look like you were born in Hawaii when you're born in Kenya.
So while all of this is going on, and then these facts come out, nothing happens. They just continue forward with their political career. These insane stories about them, these vile kind of horror-tinged, the John Podesta files, but nobody seems to be caring about things like that, and I can't believe they're missing it. And so what happened with Hillary is all those things from the past you mentioned, then time rolls on, and then people talk about, well, here, look at the Whitewater thing, and here, look at all the evidence about Vince Foster, and they go, oh, come on, that's impossible. And they never really take a look at it head on. You have an election campaign today, and they go, oh yeah, she's good, she's clean, everything's great. Why did they both pick such a lame, who's Tim Kaine, Who's Mike Pence? If Hillary really meant what she was saying, she was kind of thinking she would have picked Bernie. It's like, okay, we're coming like the super team. We're going to do this whole thing, But that would have put her right over the top. But then she wouldn't want the fact that, he had a lot to do with it, so she had to have it all. I don't respect her as a politician, but I understand these other people helped to move her out. That's who I want to talk about. Who's actually, helping to maneuver? Is this like, can you talk about Soros? Is that a real thing, George Soros? Or, what kind of people?
Soros was backing Clinton. He's pro-Clinton. But let's just back up for a second. So remember, if there was a real counter coup, which Donald Trump may represent, she would be charged with obstruction of justice in the murder of the President of the United States, as well as many other crimes and misdemeanors, treason, having sold nuclear parts to the North Koreans, running a murder Inc., just like the mob, where she's been involved indirectly and tied to the murder of hundreds of people with her husband. So, like, if you compare her track record to Donald Trump's, call some girl a nasty nape with Billy Bush or something. He's not a murderer. He's not part of a coup or a conspiracy to murder the President of the United States. He's a patriot.
You know how much more fun that would have been on the bus with Billy Bush and Trump? It wasn't Billy Bush, but Jeb Bush.
Yeah. So,
Barbara. Barbara.
So, the winners get to write history. And it looks like the exciting thing now is it really looks like this is going to be, let's pray that he makes it to the inauguration, because these are the people who are going to stop at nothing to try and assassinate him. And if he's assassinated, look out. America's is going to be into a civil war.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He goes down, it's all over.
Not just a hidden civil war behind the scenes. This will be the military will move in and take over the White House and take over the government. The patriots within the White House. Remember, we're dealing with a country which was a colony of England and fought against its mother, gained its independence thanks to the French.
Isn't that fun to say?
The patriots, Patrick Henry, and the patriots that George Washington, Patrick Henry, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Key, etc. The real patriots, Jefferson, their troops didn't win ultimately because Cornwallis did not surrender to George Washington. Cornwallis surrendered to Lafayette, the French, and the French turned to the Americans and said, because we've defeated the British, we're not going to make this a French colony. We're going to let you guys set up your country. This is something that has
to do with the painting that wasn't quite finished.
That's right. The painting that's in every U.S. post office of George Washington is not finished. It's unfinished.
The artist had a heart attack.
It was because the patriots wanted to show their anger at Washington that he never did win the war and defeat the British. It was the French who defeated the British. And that's why you have the Esprit de Corps agreement to this day, which is the only such document or only such arrangement between two countries ever in the history of mankind and ever in the history today. And what makes it unique is the French government is allowed to billet French troops on American soil, and the American government cannot stop it. And that's because French troops, something like 43 or 44,000, I forget the number, but it's a large number of young French men spilt their blood on American soil in 1776. And so
you're saying that at any moment and without any warning and without any resistance, the French...
Without any resistance, there's nothing the American government, the Pentagon, is allowed to do to stop the French from sending troops onto American soil. And there's times when during the Iraq War in 91, the Kuwait War, I should say, and again the Iraq War, there were more French troops in the United States than there were American troops. Yeah.
And how long has that situation been in effect?
Since 1778,
Oh, well, maybe the vibe from that is contagious, and that's why America just keeps wanting to crash into every other country all the time and expect to get away with it.
Well, as I once said, when Bush 43 got into government, he tried to unwind that agreement, and even his most rabid generals said, no, we can't touch it. Absolutely, you cannot touch that agreement. It's so solid within the American Pentagon and the American system that Bush himself as president couldn't do anything about it, which made him very angry, and is why out of the blue he started to do that. He didn't want to call it French fries.
You see if you can find a loop. There must be some kind of loophole in there.
Yeah, it must be a loophole in there.
Some kind of... I remember all the time there was always a loophole in the best movies. Yeah, well, I guess there wasn't a loophole. That's what you're saying.
There was no loophole.
So they can just show up. They can just show up anytime, and what would happen though? Like, what if they did? So they show up, and then people are going, "What the hell's going on?" They dock in New York Harbor and start stomping around Manhattan.
Everybody at Fort Benning, people behind the scenes, and I learned this from a 4-star general. People behind the scenes know about it. I mean, this isn't a hidden thing. I mean, American troops often will go on the bases and there'll be French troops there. A lot of times these troops are not in French uniform. I mean, a lot of time they're in suits and ties. A lot of times they work for their disguise. They're working for Air France in New York, Air France in Chicago, Air France in Miami. They're working for the embassy in Miami, the embassy here, the embassy there. Sometimes there's troops actually with French uniforms on them at an American base, Fort Benning, Fort Detrick, Fort Bragg, whatever. But that's not unheard of because sometimes there's Canadian troops on these bases. Sometimes there's Russian troops, French troops, NATO troops. But these other countries like Canada, France, any of these other countries, they have to get the okay of the American Pentagon to send the troops, but not the French. Yeah. So that's where Hillary Clinton got her capital. Of course, she's connected to the Rockefeller because Bill Clinton, her husband, is the illegitimate son of one of the Rockefellers. I understand it. We were told it was Winthrop Rockefeller. I had a guy who was in charge of a Rockefeller Foundation. Told me that it was Winthrop Rockefeller. And the fact that Winthrop Rockefeller basically owned most of the land in Arkansas and Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. I mean, it made sense. That's how he got to be governor.
Kicking back to that point I was saying about being clean, being perceived to be clean, but then they had that whole cocaine into Mena, Arkansas thing.
Yeah. Running the drug cartel with the Bushes.
The pilot that knew everything and was killed and
that, but everybody knows that Mena, Arkansas. That's now pretty well public knowledge that that's where they were. It was one of the main station points for bringing drugs into the U.S.
Why do you think Donald Trump wasn't saying something about that in the debate?
Well, I think he's smart enough that those things have to be left unsaid, and you don't want to show your cards at a card game to the other side or to people watching the card game. You keep it close to your vest.
Well, he just said he was going to hit her hard, and I was wondering when he said that how hard he was going to hit, knowing that he knows some things.
Well, he obviously hit hard enough.
Yeah. So what was we'll get to the whys and the hows and the big, what was your take on the night?
Well, the bottom up about the election that we should talk about is the fact that, the internet and Facebook and Twitter especially allowed Trump to talk over the head of the pundits, over the head of CNN and the CNNs, and talk directly to the people. And so the people could be in touch with him directly. And that bypassed the networks. And what we're witnessing here is not only a revolution with the social media, but this is the end of network media. This is the end of the networks. The networks are finished now. CNN will become a shopping channel. people don't care about what the pundits say. They don't want to hear about the polls because they know it's all biased. CNN revealed, CNN you'd think would have at least kept some semblance of neutrality, but they were just the people who were behind.
Why would I think that?
After 53 years, 53 years since Dallas, this coup you can't keep these coups together forever. The counter coup has been boiling beneath the surface little by little by little, and eventually it struck gold and overcame, and the counter coup succeeded. And there's a very good guy on YouTube. His name's
Pichenik, yeah.
He's also part of that counter coup group.
Yeah. I watched a couple of his videos, and then all of the election happened, winning his the thing he was describing, I guess.
And I'm sure Leo Wanta is in the mix somewhere there. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what happens because everything's coming out to the surface and is going to be exposed. There's nothing hidden that isn't going to be revealed, as the Bible says. This is going to be an exciting time. Let's pray that Donald's protected and is kept out of harm's way and is allowed to retrieve freedom and democracy, unwind the treason that's been going on for 53 years.
You're basically connecting the movers and shakers behind the scenes of the Kennedy assassination with the Clinton Foundation, the Clintonista. So there's a different body of people behind, obviously, the new fella there, Trump, and he's going to try to do well, isn't he? And that's what that's what's going on. So who are those folks? Now they're finally getting their turn. Who's behind that?
Well, first of all, we don't have all. We can surmise. I mean, certainly there's the families that were part of the original creation of the United States. You're going to have, first of all, you've got a lot of the French forces. You've got a lot of people who don't want to be known right now, and that for good reason. It's a dangerous time. They don't want to come out of the shadows.
That's why I'm asking.
I think we're still in a very, very dangerous time. Right now, for the counter coup, we've got to get him to the inauguration and get him. I'm convinced that Obama worked very closely with Osama. And, I mean, it's not coincidental that, Osama was a CIA agent.
Tim Osman. Tim Osman.
And the fact that it's Osama and Obama, I mean, this is all part of the game, and these guys are closely linked. Just like Hitler and Churchill were second cousins and both attended Tavistock, the Psychological Warfare Division of British Army, in 1911, were classmates.
That's embarrassing. Ooh, we don't talk about that part.
Yeah. And then Hitler was the Vatican through the rat line got Hitler out to Argentina, so he went from the Fuhrer bunker to the Argentina bunker, and then
the Argentina. Now, just no, please, just go back a little bit. Going to take a little slower of a build into this.
Well, it's been well established now by true historians.
Well, the way we're talking about it, you got to hear.
Get the book Hitler Was a British Agent. That's the first thing.
You get it. I don't want to get it.
It's been very well documented now by the true neutral historians,
all right,
seasoned linguists, that Hitler survived the war and went to Argentina. J. Edgar Hoover said it happened. Stalin told Churchill it happened.
Those are on the internet, folks. You can get those. Yeah.
This is well documented. So Hitler survived the war and planned the Korean War, planned the McCarthy. I mean, Waffen SS all took over in 1945.
It's fair to say Germany lost the war, but the Germany lost the war, but the Nazis didn't.
Won the war. Yeah, the Nazis won the war because the Nazis took over with the bulge. The Pentagon, they closed down. A good litmus test is this. We had to close down, the Allies had to close down their intelligence agencies the OSS, and a Waffen-SS general, Reinhard Gehlen, started the CIA. If we won the war, how come we had to shut down our intelligence agency? And with the shutdown of the OSS, all that network of spies that helped us win the war were all vulnerable to being exposed, and were exposed and murdered. And this was shown in the movie The Good Shepherd, by the way.
Good film. Yeah. 2006, I think.
With Matt Damon, who basically played James Jesus Angleton, who was head of counterintelligence at CIA, who was working with the Dulles brothers, who were behind the Kennedy assassination, as you know. Just to go back, it was...
That's a big one, right?
Well
the Dulles brothers were behind the Kennedy assassination. Is that how it worked out?
Absolutely.
You mean financially behind, or like they came up with the plan? Somebody sat down and said, "Okay, we're going to kill this guy." And you're saying that was one of the Dulles brothers? Oh,
yes, that's been well established. The Dulles brothers were part of the assassination of John Kennedy, President Kennedy.
Huh. That's amazing.
Foster Dulles, John Foster Dulles, and Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles was director of the CIA at the time of the assassination.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Garrison identified Jim Garrison identified and knew everybody who was involved, and Mae Brussel worked with her, and Penn Jones. I was fortunate enough to meet Penn Jones and spend a lot of time with him.
Is that those magic guys that tell you how the tricks work? Oh, Penn Jones. No. Who's Penn Jones?
Penn Jones Jr. was the publisher of Midlothian Mirror. He's the one depicted he's the one who got Garrison to go back into the investigation and reopen the investigation. He was the one who, and he was a consultant on the Stone film, the Oliver Stone JFK film, Penn Jones. I knew Penn very well and worked with him.
Oh, great. And that's worth taking a look at again, I think. That's
the picture I have up on my site, that picture at Pearson Airport in Toronto of me and Penn Jones.
Right.
That's when I was working with him in 71, 72, around the time of Watergate, a few years after the Clay Shaw trial. Remember, Jim Garrison charged Clay Shaw, Vatican agent who worked for the Vatican, and Major Louis Mortimer Bloomfield, who was head of the North American desk for British intelligence. He named those two guys as being the major point men behind the assassination at the top.
So now where we are is we have this other different body of people or organizations now who are not the Clinton people, who are whoever's behind and involved with. And I just want to know who you think that is, because we're now living in Trump presidents, the Trump presidency.
Well, it would be people who are, I think you'll find that it'll be people around Al Gore.
Really?
Al Gore is an admiral in the Navy. He'd be behind his family. Gore Vidal is his cousin.
Okay, but hang on. Before we go to this, we're kind of talking about going up to Argentina bunker. You were explaining what the Argentina bunker was.
Well, you understand. Let's go back.
I just wanted to pick up exactly what the Argentina bunker is, so that we get a really heavy reflection in the reference of the modern day sitcom.
Okay, let's just go through the people who in 1945 took over and were part of the bulge that led to the coup. You had Fritz Kramer. All these guys are Hitler's Waffen-SS. Fritz Kramer, Reinhard Gehlen, Werner von Braun, Walter Dornberger. Walter Dornberger was von Braun's boss. Remember, Werner von Braun was in charge of Peenemünde, the Nazi rocket program. The
Was this
V1
a James Bond film? The way all these names, I mean, I can't believe it. I guess I'm just ignorant of all these names.
Von Braun. This is public knowledge.
I know it is, but the way you...
Werner von Braun was in charge of the V1, the Nazi German rocket program, run out of Warnemünde. His boss was Walter Dornberger. Walter Dornberger at Nuremberg was charged with high crimes against humanity. Was convicted at Nuremberg, was sentenced to hang. He didn't hang because the Vatican got him out through the rat line to America, and he became president of Bell Helicopters. And there's a letter from the British Foreign Office. You can see it, it's on the internet. There's a letter from the British Foreign Office to the American State Department ordering and advising the State Department to carry out the execution orders of Nuremberg and do not leave this man alive. They did. He became president of Bell Helicopters, Walter Dornberger. Reinhard Gehlen, also Waffen-SS, took over the CIA, shut down the Allies' OSS. Kurt Waldheim, Waffen-SS, became Secretary General of the UN. Fritz Kramer became Chief Plans Officer at the Pentagon. Helene Van Damme, who was on Hitler's high command, became Governor and President Reagan's appointment secretary. Shall I go on? They took over Waffen-SS, the Bulge. The Bulge took over. The Bulge took over in 1945. Hitler went to Argentina. They planned the Vietnam War. They planned the Korean War first. Then they planned the Army McCarthy hearings, and they brought in the communist scare. The Nazis, of course, brought in the communist scare with McCarthy. Then, of course, they assassinated Kennedy in Dallas. Read May Brussels' article, Google it in, the Nazi connection to the JFK assassination, which my friend Larry Flint published in his magazine. He started Rebel magazine just for May, just for that. Her article was the first issue. And then, of course, they started the Vietnam War. And who made the bulk of the money? Which corporation made more money from the Vietnam War than any other company? Bell Helicopters. Now, Walter Dornberger, who was sentenced to hang at Nuremberg that I told you about, that became president of Bell Helicopters, his right-hand man who worked for him at Bell Helicopters was Michael Payne. Now, Michael Payne was the family that Lee Harvey Oswald lived with when he left Russia and came back to the United States. So Walter Dornberger's connection and fingerprints is all over the Kennedy assassination. Read the article by May Brussels, The Nazi Connection to the JFK Assassination, for all the details. Alan,
so
when I talk, I don't give my opinion ever. You do not. This is nothing I'm saying to you is my opinion. As a chief archivist, as Marshall McLuhan's chief archivist, I had the opportunity to go into and read a lot of documents, a lot of top secret documents. Right. So when I read a document and I tell you something, it's not my personal opinion I'm giving you. I'm giving you the facts because as an archivist, I've read the facts.
No, that's why I talked to you. I already know that.
Yeah, but I want your listeners to realize I'm not here giving my opinion.
No, I know.
Nothing I've said is my opinion. Every single scrap of information I'm giving you is reference to true documents, court documents that you can go and check it out. Not one statement I've made today is from my personal point of view.
The only thing I don't like about giving facts is when you give facts, sometimes when you give a fact like that and it's really heavy and weird and trippy and people say, well, yeah, but no, but what about, and they start to argue. It's like, well, don't argue. It's just a fact.
It's a fact. Go get on the internet and check it out.
Yeah.
Go to the Library of Congress.
Yeah. I know you don't want it to be true and we all agree it's horrible.
I don't want it to be true, but go to the Library of Congress and check it out.
Yeah.
Just like, well, you know what? Look, you can go to the Library of Congress and you can say that in 1942, a lawyer for the U.S. government, Jacob Chaikin, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, took away and seized the assets of the Brown Harriman Bank because they had financed more than 90% of Nazi Germany's war production. Now that's a fact, and it's not an opinion. And if you don't, and you can go to the Library of Congress and see that they, under that act, they seized that bank. And who was the CEO of the bank? Prescott Bush. Who's Prescott Bush? George Bush 41's father.
Yeah, the grandpa. Yeah, so it's fair to say, like, so much of the family's money and success behind them is funded by Nazi profiteering.
Hitler was put in power by the Brown Harriman Bank and the Anglo-American, let's call it the Nazis were financed by the British Crown. That's what Garrison found. You had the Vatican and the British Crown financing the Nazis to get Hitler to go to power, go to Russia, keep Europe divided in order to keep Britain and the British Crown, not the British government, the British Crown, powerful and at the top of the heap. Everybody knows that's why Queen Elizabeth is the queen today, because her uncle had to step down because he was a friend of Hitler's.
That's always embarrassing, isn't it?
The Queen Mother, the current Queen's aunts, were married to the Hess boys, the two Hess brothers, who were put Hitler in power, part of Hitler's group. So the Queen's aunts are top-level Waffen-SS Nazis, married to Waffen-SS Nazis. I mean, hello? This is a fact.
Pass the marmalade. Ooh,
the know-nothings, the nobodies and the know-nothings who you talk to, they can say, oh, well, I don't know about that. I think I disagree. Well, you can't disagree. It's a fact. It's like water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a fact.
Yeah. I know, but I know you still get the reaction, though, and it always...
we just give facts here. We're archivists. We just put out the facts and link and connect the dots. You can do what you like with it, but you can't dispute the facts. These are facts.
It's a fact that you can't dispute the facts. Absolutely.
I'm a chief archivist. I only deal in facts. I never give my own point of view on any subject. I never give you my own point of view. I'm fortunate that I'm a speed reader and I've got a photographic memory, and I can sit around here like a preacher, like a Bible preacher, and just spew out verses from the Bible and never give you my own opinion, which is what I do.
Oh, gosh. What a bad time to break it up a little bit. Hang on.
Walter Dornberger.
Oh, Walter Dornberger.
All the money they made Bell helicopters. I mean,
so yeah. So when did Bell start? When did Bell helicopters start?
Then the Nazis faked the moon landing.
Well, when did Bell helicopters start? Was that in time for the Korean War? Were they using it in the Korean War?
I think it started in 1946.
Yeah, so that would have been there for the Korean War and the Vietnam War, making a ton of money there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the icon, the symbol for the wars, those two wars, is a Huey helicopter.
Yeah, and that's the Bell helicopter, huh?
The Bell helicopter. Yeah.
How do you go, like, what kind of lawyer, I guess, do you need or palm to grease to go from found guilty at Nuremberg, sentenced to die, and then all of a sudden get all over back to the States and have a most successful company? Not just get away with it and like hide in some like hovel in Montana where nobody knows your name. You got to do, but like actually have a successful company that's involved in the war effort and to profiteer.
That's the Vatican.
Wow.
As Marshall McLuhan said, the chair of Peter jets around the world.
Wow. That's the Vatican doing that?
That's right, the Vatican.
Wow. Facilitating the war in that way. Yeah. The killing, which is the thing they say you're not supposed to do.
That's all.
Okay, just check it.
That's a factual matter now. That's not even hidden. I mean, that's like years ago we used to say, oh, look at all these priests. They're all assaulting these little boys, et cetera, et cetera. It's a fact now. Go see the movie Spotlight. Great film.
Yeah. Yeah, just keep getting away with it.
They should They should shine that spotlight on the rat line. It's very dangerous now because we've got a wounded rabid dog. This coup, and they're going to try and look what they're doing. George Soros is paying all these people to go riot on the streets and start
So now
fire.
back to the election. Let's talk about that. So George Soros is paying people to riot on the streets. He's also a major backer of the Clinton campaign, right? So
absolutely.
Now he's funding people. So he's funding Black Lives Matter, which means what does that mean exactly? Like, what does it mean? Let's zoom right in on this one. What does it mean that George Soros, the supposedly official story philanthropist billionaire, but what is he really, is funding Black Lives Matter? So let's say, what kind of guy is this guy really? I mean, if we say he's a philanthropist, that's not really a problem, right? So what's the problem of George Soros, and what's the wrong thing of Black Lives Matter?
Even while Soros tells Congress and the Treasury that hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis, Soros hedge funds operate offshore to avoid scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So he's avoiding the rules.
Yeah, that's right.
Americans can't invest in the quantum offshore fund. Why is that?
Because the fund is not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So we are not, because we are not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Because we find it more convenient to operate without it. Yes, and whatever regulations are imposed, we will obey. We already conform to everything. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt. Not at all. Not at all. Of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was... well, actually, funny way, that if I weren't there, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Well, let's remember that in 1912, the Vatican and the Jesuits built the Titanic, lured three of the wealthiest men in the world were against the central bank. You see, Alexander Hamilton, who designed the American economic system, was always against the central bank, because if you could control a country's money supply, you could take control of the whole country. So Strauss from Macy's, Astor, and Guggenheim were the three wealthiest men. They were all against a central bank. The Jesuits in the Vatican built the Titanic, lured those three guys on it, sunk the boat. You see, they had to disguise the murder of these three men in such a way.
And it was easy, right? I mean, everybody wanted to go on.
They had to make sure nobody started to ask questions and saw that, three guys, if they had murdered them with poison cup or with something, people would say, some Sherlock Holmes detectives would say, what's the connection, these three guys? Who would want to murder them? They realize, the motive, who benefits? The Jesuits and the people putting together the central bank would. But this way, you do it with the Titanic, people think it was just an order. The ship was sunk with hitting an iceberg. Well, it may have hit an iceberg, but really the evidence shows that there was an explosion as well. And the whole thing was, if you look at the book, The Lucky Priest, Brown, the cat in the Titanic, was a high-level Fourth Oath Jesuit who was ordered to scuttle the ship to kill these guys so that they could. Then in 1912 at Jekyll Island, immediately after the Titanic incident, these three guys were dead. They brought in the Federal Reserve Bank. And Ezra Pound knew it, and they put him in an insane asylum. The Federal Reserve is a Vatican bank. and they use the Hofjuden. The Vatican always uses Jews to front their operations so they can remain invisible behind the scenes. So you've got the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Kuhn-Loebs, the Morgans, and the Schiffs, and those are the 5 main families in the Fed that are behind, that run cover, and are the front men for the papacy. It's a Vatican bank, and you can read May Brussels stuff about that, Sherman Skolnick, Ezra Pound, and my old friend Eustace Mullins. Read his book, Federal Reserve Conspiracy, if you're familiar with that. So all the facts are there.
Now, why are those people always tinged in discussion? Eustace Mullins and people like this. It's EUSTACE. If you're looking at Eustace Mullins,
right?
People
Mullins.
like him, and when they get digging around, what is it exactly about Eustace Mullins and people of that nature that when he draws the attack of being an anti-Semite? What's going on there? Because I don't really understand what that means. As soon as somebody starts trying to understand how the Fed works or whatever, it's like anti-Semite. It's like, what? Hang on. What's going on with that?
Because these groups, because the chair of Peter uses, remember Rome used Judas Iscariot in order to murder Christ. If you started to criticize Judas Iscariot, they'd say, oh, you're anti-Semite. Well, no, we're not anti-Semite. It's just that they use Jews as front men. So Eustace Mullins started to attack the Fed, and naturally, that's how the Vatican and the chair of Peter protects itself. It makes sure that it has front men who are Jews. So if anybody attacks them, they can claim that people are anti-Semitic.
Right.
So George Soros is Jewish, and he's a Hofjuden. But attacking George Soros, I'm not doing it because I'm anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Semitic at all, nor am I anti-Jew. I'm just saying that these are the Hofjuden. They're called Hofjuden, which are court Jews, whether they go before the court of St. James.
But if I criticize what Obama did or what Trump presidents is going to do, does that make me anti-American? Like, is that a fair thing to say? That's a little bit. No, I don't think. Well, people might say it, but look, this guy, Obama's like Othello in a Shakespeare novel, in the Shakespeare play. If you look at Othello, you'll see in the Dramatis Personae, you'll see that it says Othello is a noble Moor in service to the Venetian state. And that's who he is. He's a noble Moor in service to the... Oh, God, I'm going to get taken off the air. Oh, that already happened. Oh, go ahead.
He's a noble Moor in service to the chair of Peter. The Vatican state is what Obama is.
Wow, when you lay it out like that.
That's why he was. That's why he went and just patted the Queen on the back, because he was working for the Vatican and the chair of Peter, who the Queen works for. When you see the Queen go before the Pope, she wears black, showing subservitude.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought she just been like eating tarts the night before and thought she was wearing back and making herself look a little more slim.
Well, there's a great article in Telegraph. I've got it on my site, the article from the Telegraph newspaper in England, where the chief exorcist of the Vatican was quoted as saying the devil lives in the Vatican. Like, this has been reported by the chief exorcist.
I remember that.
Once again, this is not my opinion. I'm just stating what's been published and what's been said. The chief exorcist quoted in the Telegraph newspaper in England saying the devil lives in the Vatican. Well, so the devil's in the Vatican. He's the god of this world, as it says in 1 Corinthians. Satan is the god of this world.
Oh, sorry, Satan is the god of this world.
Yeah, that's where's the book of print.
Where's he at?
Well, his headquarters is in Rome. But, his office and his throne is in Rome.
Oh, okay.
Trump. It was called the last Trump.
Yeah.
At the last Trump, he's thrown into the bottomless pit.
We better make sure that little Baron stays okay,
Yeah. At the last Trump. Revelation chapter 20, verse 2 and 3, he seized the dragon, the serpent of ancient days, who is both the devil and Satan, and bound him fast for 1,000 years. Then he hurled him into the pit, the bottomless pit, and locked and sealed it over his head so that he could deceive the nations no more until the 1,000 years were past. But then he must be set free for a little while. That's another story for another day, but he's put in the bottomless pit. So we're very close to that time when he's going to be put away. Trump's here, the last Trump.
Be sure to subscribe to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park on iTunes and to our YouTube channel. If you want to support the show and help create more episodes, you can become a patron at patreon.com/conspiracyqueries. We appreciate your feedback, so send us comments, complaints, or queries of your own to conspiracyqueries@gmail.com, or you can post them on our website at conspiracyqueries.com. Thanks for listening.